When my son looked me dead in the eyes and said, "Dad, you're worth nothing," something inside me shattered. For years, I believed I was raising a man, someone who would carry my name with pride, someone who would remember the sacrifices I made. But in that moment, I realized I had raised a stranger who measured my worth only by the money he thought he could take from me. What my son didn't know was that I had already been preparing for this day. I had spent a lifetime building not just wealth, but wisdom. And when he tried to steal from me, when he thought he could humiliate me in front of the bank manager, the only thing louder than his arrogance was the sound of the bank manager's laughter. Before I begin, do me one favor, subscribe to the channel and drop a comment telling me where you're listening from. Your support means everything. My name is Daniel Miller. I'm 68 years old, a retired accountant and a widower of 12 years. My wife Laura passed from cancer when she was just 55. Since then, my life has revolved around one thing, my son, Andrew. Andrew was my pride and joy. From the moment he was born, I promised Laura I would give him the life we never had. I worked overtime for decades, stayed up nights balancing books for small businesses, just to make sure Andrew never went without. When he wanted to attend a private university, tuition of nearly $40,000 a year, I paid it. When he wanted his dream wedding, I covered the $35,000 bill so he wouldn't start married life in debt. When he and his new wife, Amanda, wanted to buy a house, I put down $90,000 in cash from my retirement savings for their down payment. And when they couldn't handle their monthly mortgage, guess who stepped in every month with a quiet deposit? Me. I told myself, this is what fathers do. This is love. But love, when taken for granted, becomes a leash, and I didn't realize until much later that I had slipped the noose around my own neck. At first it was little things. Andrew stopped calling me Dad and instead called me old man, like it was some kind of joke. Amanda rolled her eyes when I offered advice. They started making decisions without ever asking for my opinion. Not that they needed to, but because they no longer valued it. Then came the bigger cracks. Holidays where I wasn't invited until the last minute. Birthdays where my gift was brushed aside, while theirs, shiny, expensive things bought with my money, were flaunted for all to see. I swallowed the disrespect, telling myself, they're young, they don't mean it, they'll realize someday. But someday never came. It was last spring when it happened. I had gone to visit Andrew at his office. He'd recently been promoted, thanks in part to my connections in the banking industry, contacts I had cultivated for over 30 years. I walked in with a smile, proud to see my son in a position I had once only dreamed of. His secretary led me in, and when Andrew looked up, he didn't smile. He frowned. "Dad, what are you doing here?" he asked flatly. "I just thought I'd surprise you," I said. "Maybe take you to lunch, like old times." He leaned back in his chair, exhaling heavily, as if my presence was a burden. Then, with Amanda on speakerphone, he said the words that burned into me like a brand. "You're worth nothing now, Dad. Do you understand that? Nothing. You're just a liability." I froze. Amanda laughed faintly in the background, as if it were a private joke between the two of them. A liability. That's what I was to my own flesh and blood. What Andrew didn't know, what Amanda didn't realize, was that my name wasn't just Dad or liability. It was Daniel Miller, a man who had spent a lifetime managing accounts, navigating financial systems, and learning every loophole the wealthy exploit. And long before Andrew ever dreamed of betraying me, I had already placed my assets into trusts, secured my will, and arranged everything so that not a single dollar could leave my hands without my permission. Still, I didn't react that day. I simply smiled, nodded, and said, "If that's how you feel, son, then maybe one day we'll see who's worth what." Little did he know that day would come much sooner than he thought. After that office encounter, I went home carrying more than just a heavy heart. I carried the echo of his words, "You're worth nothing." For nights, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering where I went wrong. I remembered teaching Andrew how to ride his bike, staying up with him the night before exams, holding him when he cried after Laura passed away. But love, as I said before, can become a leash, and my leash was tightening. The next blow came a few weeks later. I was dropping off some documents at Andrew's house, old family tax papers he needed for a refinancing application. I rang the bell, but nobody answered. The door was slightly ajar, so I stepped in, calling his name. That's when I heard them, Andrew and Amanda. Their voices carried from the kitchen. Amanda, it's Simp. Oh, your dad is old. He won't live forever. If we get power of attorney, the accounts are ours. The house is ours. Everything. Andrew, but he's sharp. He won't sign anything without reading it. Amanda, so? Make him trust you. Tell him it's routine paperwork. He'll believe you. He always does. I stood frozen in the hallway, my heart pounding. Power of attorney? Routine paperwork? They weren't just dismissing me as a liability. They were plotting to strip me of everything I had left. And worse, they thought I was too old, too blind, too trusting to stop them. 2 days later, Andrew showed up at my house with a folder. Dad, he said, with that same fake smile I'd seen too many times lately, the bank needs us to update some routine forms. Just sign here so I can take care of everything for you. Don't worry about the details. He slid the folder across the table, pen poised like he was ready to guide a child through his homework. I didn't even look down at first. I looked at him, really looked. And in his eyes I saw not my son, but a stranger, greedy, impatient, desperate. I opened the folder slowly. Power of attorney, just like Amanda had said. A single signature, and everything I owned, my house, my savings, my pension, would be his to control. I closed the folder and pushed it back to him. I'll read this later, I said evenly. I don't sign things without understanding them. For a split second, his mask cracked. Annoyance flashed across his face. Dad, it's nothing. Just sign it. You're overthinking. But I smiled, a calm, steady smile. Andrew, I said, I taught you never to sign anything without reading it. Remember? Maybe you should take that advice yourself. His face tightened. He grabbed the folder, muttered something under his breath, and left. A week later, I got a call from my old friend George, the branch manager at First National Bank. Daniel, he said carefully, your son was just here. He tried to access your accounts, said he had your authorization. My stomach tightened. George continued. He even brought those papers, power of attorney, but I told him they weren't valid without your notarized signature. He wasn't happy. I leaned back in my chair, gripping the phone. My son had actually gone to the bank. He wasn't bluffing. He wanted it all, and he wanted it now. George, I said quietly, if he comes back, call me first. Don't let him touch a cent. You have my word, George replied. But Daniel, you should be prepared. He looked angry, very angry. That weekend, Andrew invited me to dinner at his house. I knew what was coming. We sat at the table, Amanda smirking across from me, her glass of wine untouched. Andrew didn't waste time. Dad, he said firmly, you're not managing things well. You're old. You forget things. Amanda and I talked about it, and it's time we take over. It's for your own good. For my own good, I repeated slowly. He leaned closer, voice hardening. Dad, you're worth nothing without us. Do you get that? Nothing. Just sign the papers. Stop being stubborn. Amanda chimed in, her voice sweet but laced with venom. You should feel lucky we're even willing to take care of everything. Most kids wouldn't. I set my fork down. My hands were steady, my voice calm. Andrew, I said softly, be very careful with your next words, because the man you think is weak is the man who built everything you're standing on. Silence fell. Amanda shifted uncomfortably. Andrew scoffed, pushing back his chair. You'll regret this, Dad. You'll regret making me your enemy. But what he didn't know was that I had already moved 3 steps ahead, because while he was plotting to steal, I was planning to teach him a lesson, one he'd never forget. After that dinner, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard his voice. You're worth nothing, Dad. Nothing. The words didn't just sting. They cut. They cut through decades of memories, slicing apart every sacrifice I had made for that boy. I tossed and turned in the quiet of my old house, the bed cold and empty without Laura beside me. Sometimes, in the darkest hours, I wished she were still here. She would have known what to say. She would have reminded Andrew of who he was, of the love that once filled this family. But she was gone, and all I had left was a son who saw me as nothing more than an obstacle to his inheritance. The next morning, I found myself sitting in the living room, staring at old photo albums. There was Andrew at 5 years old, beaming with pride as I held the back of his bicycle seat, steadying him as he learned to ride. There he was at 12, standing awkwardly in his new baseball uniform, the one I had worked an extra weekend to pay for. And there he was at 18, in his cap and gown, Laura beside me with tears in her eyes as we watched him graduate. Back then, every dollar I spent on him felt like an investment, not in wealth, but in love, in family, in a future where he would stand by me as I had stood by him. But staring at those photographs now, I realized something bitter. I had invested in someone who no longer valued me. I thought about the nights I stayed up, calculator in hand, juggling bills just to cover his tuition. I remembered the vacations I skipped, the clothes I never bought for myself, the retirement fund I drained, all to make sure Andrew never felt deprived. And for what? So he could sit across from me and tell me I was worth nothing? I clenched my fists, tears stinging the corners of my eyes, not because I had lost money, but because I had lost him. The boy I raised, the man I believed in, was gone, replaced by someone blinded by greed, poisoned by entitlement, and emboldened by Amanda's manipulations. That week, the house felt emptier than ever. I cooked meals for one, ate in silence, and walked the halls filled with memories of laughter that would never return. Neighbors dropped by, asking if I was okay. I smiled, nodded, told them I was fine, but inside, I was breaking. One night, I poured myself a glass of whiskey and sat on the porch. The summer air was warm, crickets chirping in the distance. I stared at the stars, wise, spearing to Laura, as if she could hear me. Did we fail him? I asked the night sky. Did I give too much? Did I make him believe love was just money? But no answer came, just the hollow silence of a man left behind. It would have been easy to surrender, to believe Andrew's words, to let him strip me of everything and fade quietly into the background. But as I sat there in the dark, a memory surfaced, one of Laura's last words to me. "Daniel," she had whispered in that hospital bed, her hand fragile in mine, "promise me you won't let Andrew lose himself. Promise me you'll protect him, even from himself." And suddenly I understood. This wasn't just about protecting my money. It wasn't even about protecting myself. It was about teaching Andrew a lesson he desperately needed before it was too late. Because if a man grows to believe his father is worth nothing, then soon he'll believe everyone is worth nothing. His wife, his children, his friends. He'll destroy not just me, but himself. And I couldn't let that happen. The next morning, I shaved, put on my best suit, and looked at myself in the mirror. The tired, broken man from last night was gone. In his place stood Daniel Miller, accountant, father, strategist. For the first time in weeks, I felt clarity. If Andrew wanted to test my worth, then I would show him, not with words, not with tears, but with the cold, undeniable language of numbers, contracts, and signatures. The language I had mastered long before he was born. And when the time came, the only thing louder than his arrogance would be the laughter of the bank manager. The very next day, I picked up my phone and made a call I hadn't made in years. "George," I said when he answered, "it's Daniel Miller. We need to talk." George, my old friend and the bank manager, didn't hesitate. "Come by tomorrow morning. I'll clear my schedule." That night, I gathered my documents, deeds, account statements, insurance policies, and the trust papers I'd set up years ago. I laid them out across my dining table like pieces of a puzzle. Every paper was a weapon, sharp, legal, undeniable. For the first time in weeks, I felt something other than grief. I felt control. George greeted me with the same firm handshake he'd given me for 3 decades. We sat in his office, the blinds half closed, the air smelling faintly of coffee and polished wood. "Daniel," he said, "I've seen a lot in my years, but your son, he's reckless. He came in here practically demanding control of your accounts. If he thinks you're losing grip, he's mistaken." I nodded. "That's why I'm here. I need everything secured, locked down so tight that not even Andrew can breathe near it." George leaned forward. "What do you have in mind?" "First," I said, sliding over the documents, "I want all my major assets transferred into my living trust. The house, my retirement funds, my savings. I remain the trustee. No one else." He scanned the papers, nodding. "Smart. That way, even if he tricks you into signing something, it won't matter. The trust overrides it." "Exactly. Second, I want my will updated. If Andrew continues down this path, not a single cent should go to him." George raised an eyebrow. "You'd disinherit him?" I exhaled slowly. "George, he already disinherited me the moment he said I was worth nothing. The next step was my attorney, Mr. Kaplan, a sharp, no-nonsense man who had drawn up contracts for me back when I ran accounting for half the businesses in town. When I told him the situation, he didn't even flinch. "We'll put everything into an ironclad trust, Daniel. Not only will Andrew have no access, but if he tries anything, he'll expose himself legally. You'll be protected." Kaplan drafted amendments, tightened clauses, and made sure every loophole was sealed shut. By the time we finished, Andrew's dreams of inheriting anything without my blessing were ashes. Over the next 2 weeks, I made changes silently. I shifted funds into new accounts Andrew didn't know existed. I updated my insurance beneficiaries to a local children's charity, one Laura had loved. I placed my house deed into the trust, ensuring no one could touch it. To Andrew, it looked like nothing had changed. I still visited occasionally, still answered his calls, still played the quiet, aging father. But underneath, the chessboard had shifted, and every piece now worked in my favor. One afternoon, George called me again. "Daniel," he said carefully, "your son is coming back to the bank this week. He's persistent. I thought you'd want to know." A slow smile spread across my face. "Good. Let him come. It's time he learns exactly how much his father is worth." George chuckled. "Should I schedule you to be here when he arrives?" "Yes," I said firmly. "I want to look him in the eye when the truth hits him." The night before the meeting, I sat in my study reviewing the documents one last time. Everything was perfect. Andrew thought he had me cornered, but in reality he had walked straight into the trap I had laid. Tomorrow, in that office, he would discover that his arrogance was built on air. And the best part? It wouldn't be me humiliating him. It would be the very system he tried to use against me, the bank manager, the contracts, the law. As I closed the folder and set it aside, I whispered to Laura's picture on the mantel. Tomorrow, he'll learn. Not just about money, but about respect. And maybe, just maybe, he'll understand what you always wanted him to, that love isn't measured in dollars, and that a father's worth can never be stolen. I arrived at First National Bank 10 minutes early. Old habit. George greeted me in the lobby with a firm handshake and led me to his glass-walled office. Papers were already stacked neatly on the desk. The trust, updated account authorizations, beneficiary designations, and the notarized directive that would make a power of attorney valid only upon certified medical incapacity, something my son clearly didn't understand. "Daniel," George said, shutting the door gently, "our compliance officer, Ms. Patel, will sit in. Just standard procedure." "Standard procedure sounds perfect," I replied, and took my seat. At 9:01, Andrew burst through the doorway as if he owned the place. Amanda followed, polished smile, phone in hand, ready to record a victory. "Great," Andrew said, dropping a folder onto George's desk without a greeting. "Let's cut to it. I'll need full access to my father's accounts, balances, statements, and authority to transact. We'll be consolidating to a single portfolio under my management." "Good morning to you, too," I said quietly. George folded his hands. "Mr. Miller, Andrew, before we proceed, I need to verify the documentation you brought last time." Andrew slid a set of papers forward. "Power of attorney, durable, immediate." He tapped the page with a manicured finger. "I'll need you to execute the change of agent and beneficiary updates while we're here." Amanda chimed in, syrupy sweet. "It's for Daniel's own good. He's been disorganized." George glanced at Ms. Patel, then back at my son. "I understand. Let's review." He read silently for a moment, then looked up. "This instrument is incomplete. The signatures are not notarized, and the attestation clause is missing the second witness. Also, this is a springing power by default under your template. Activation requires certification by 2 independent physicians. That documentation is not present." Andrew's jaw tightened. "That's ridiculous. It's my father. I'm his son. He wants me to handle things." George turned to me. "Mr. Miller?" I kept my voice even. "I have not granted Andrew any authority to manage my affairs, nor do I intend to." Amanda's smile snapped. Andrew leaned forward. "You're confused, Dad. We talked about this. You want me to manage things." George slid a second folder onto the desk. The embossed leather looked almost ceremonial. "For clarity, this is the controlling document for Mr. Daniel Miller's assets, the Miller Living Trust. Mr. Miller is the sole trustee. Successor trustees are named here," he tapped the page, "and you, Andrew, are not among them." He let that sink in, then continued, calm, clinical. "Trust assets are not subject to a personal POA. The trustee controls them, period." Amanda recovered first. "Then we'll move everything out of the trust. Easy." George shook his head. "Only a trustee can move trust assets. Beneficiaries have no authority to transfer, pledge, or encumber trust property." Andrew scoffed. "Fine. Then give me access to the non-trust accounts, checking, savings, his pension disbursement. We'll start there. Ms. Patel slid a printed form across. Per our records, all operating accounts were retitled to the trust 2 weeks ago. The remaining personal account is view only for pension deposits. Disbursements auto-transfer to the trust on receipt. Dual-factor authorization is required for any changes, via the trustee's device. She nodded toward me. Mr. Miller's device. Andrew's ears reddened. This is elder abuse, he blurted, the words tumbling out too fast. You're isolating him and refusing me access. I'll sue this bank. I'll have your license, George. George's lips twitched. He tried, really tried, to keep a straight face. But then he glanced at the obviously invalid power of attorney, the blank witness line, T.S. He lack of notary seal, the template header still visible at the bottom of the page, and he laughed. It started as a small, disbelieving chuckle, then a genuine, warm, utterly unbothered laugh that filled the room. He wasn't mocking the gravity, he was reacting to the absurdity. Andrew, he said kindly when he caught his breath, no court, no regulator, no bank is going to accept an unsigned, unwitnessed, unnotarized, non-activated template as grounds to seize control of a competent adult's estate, especially one held in a properly constituted living trust. The color drained from my son's face. Ms. Patel's tone stayed neutral. For completeness, we verified capacity last week. Mr. Miller passed our cognitive screening with full marks. He also executed a restricted agent authorization that explicitly bars you, Andrew, and you, Amanda, from acting on his accounts, now or in the future. Amanda's eyes flashed. He did that because you pressured him. I tilted my head. Amanda, I did it because you asked me to sign a power of attorney you didn't understand. George nodded toward a second document. There's more. Beneficiary designations on payable on death accounts and life policies were updated. Primary beneficiary, the Laura Miller Scholarship Fund at the children's charity Mr. Miller supports. Contingent beneficiary, the trust. Andrew looked at me as if I had struck him. You cut me out? I met his gaze, steady, not cruel. I protected what your mother and I built. That's different. Desperation makes people sloppy. Andrew fumbled for another tactic. Fine. Then I'll inherit the house when he passes. It's still in his name. George folded open a deed packet. Recorded last week. Title is held by the trust. Property tax mailing address updated. There is no transfer on death deed to you. Amanda shot up in her chair. Then we'll contest. Undue influence. Coercion. Ms. Patel checked a log. Mr. Miller completed all changes in person over multiple visits with independent counsel present. Our branch videos, timestamps, and attorney witness statements document free will and capacity. George added, and for what it's worth, Daniel drove here each time, early, with his checklist. He smiled at me. Accountants don't forget their checklists. Andrew's voice went cold. You can laugh now, George, but I know things. Dad's got a safe deposit box here. We'll start there. He's been hiding things. Documents, cash, keys. Ms. Patel slid out the signature card. Authorized access, the trustee, that's Daniel. No co-renters, no proxies. And we require in-person verification with valid ID, audio and video monitored. Unbelievable, Andrew muttered, hands shaking. So, what? You're just going to let him throw his life away on a charity? On strangers? I breathed in slowly. Your mother's name is on that fund. Those children are not strangers. He turned on me then. Anger, hurt, panic, a storm behind his eyes. You said you loved me. I do, I said softly. That's why I'm doing this legally, cleanly, and while I'm alive, so you learn what love is not. It is not greed. It is not entitlement. It is not a signature you trick from a parent. Amanda stood, collecting her bag. We're done here. Come on, Andrew. We'll go to corporate. George remained serene. You're welcome to. They'll tell you the same thing. And just so expectations are clear, attempting to transact on accounts with invalid authority could trigger a fraud report. I'm sure that's not what you intend. The word fraud seemed to slap the air. Andrew stared at the floor. George turned to me with professional warmth. Mr. Miller, while we're together, would you like to enable the trusted contact flag? It lets us alert your attorney if anyone, tries to pressure you again. Yes, I said. Add Mr. Kaplan. Ms. Patel made the note. Done. Andrew exhaled sharply. So, that's it? After everything I've done for you? I held up a hand. Son, a ledger goes both ways. If you want to talk about everything done, we can. But not here. Not today. He looked at George, then at me, then at the neat towers of paper that represented his defeated plan. The room was quiet enough to hear the clock tick. When he finally spoke, his voice was small. "You made me feel like I'm nothing." I swallowed. "No, I showed you that I'm not. There's a difference." Security wasn't needed. Andrew didn't shout. He didn't break anything. He just gathered the hollow folder with its blank witness line and ghost white notary block and walked out, shoulders tight, Amanda 2 steps behind, heels clicking a brittle rhythm across the tile. George watched them disappear through the glass, then closed the door gently and let out a breath he'd been holding. "I'm sorry, Daniel," he said. "I'm not," I answered. "Not for this." He nodded. "You did everything by the book." "By the book is how I raised him," I said. "Maybe he'll read it this time." We finished the formalities, trusted contact flag, alert thresholds, a note to call me if anyone even whispered my name at a teller window. When we stood, George offered his hand again. "You were right," I told him, and smiled. The laughter helped. He chuckled, softer now. Sometimes the law doesn't need to roar. It just needs to stand. I stepped back into the morning light, the city humming like it always had. The air felt cleaner. The weight I'd carried for months had shifted, not because I'd crushed my son, but because I'd finally refused to let him crush me. The storm had passed. The lesson had begun. The days after that meeting were quiet. Too quiet. Andrew didn't call. Amanda didn't text. For the first time in months, my phone stayed silent. At first it felt strange. I'd grown used to their constant demands, their urgent, "Dad, we need this," and "Dad, can you cover that?" But now, nothing. Instead, I cooked meals for myself. I fixed the squeaky porch swing Laura always loved. I balanced my own book. It was not Andrew's. The house didn't feel so heavy anymore. It felt like mine again. One evening, I poured a glass of wine and sat by the fireplace, Laura's picture smiling back at me from the mantel. "I did it," I whispered. "I protected what we built." And then I thought about Andrew, not with anger this time, but with something softer, pity maybe. He thought worth was measured in dollars and signatures. He thought love was a balance sheet, but life doesn't work that way. Love without respect is hollow. Inheritance without gratitude is poison. Maybe one day he'll learn that. Maybe he won't. But I had done my part. When Andrew told me I was worth nothing, I believed him for a moment. I let those words cut me, and I almost surrendered. But now I see the truth. Worth isn't measured by what someone else says about you. Worth isn't measured by money or power or inheritance. It's measured by what you protect, by the values you stand for, and by the courage to defend them, even from those you love most. My son thought he could strip me of everything. Instead, he lost the one thing he never realized he needed most, my trust. And that is a debt no bank can repay. So let this be a lesson, not just to Andrew, but to anyone listening. If you ever think someone is worth nothing, be very careful, because the very person you dismiss might be the one who taught you everything you know. And when you betray them, you may discover the truth too late. A father's worth cannot be stolen. If you've stayed with me through this story, thank you. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and drop a comment below. Tell me, have you ever seen greed destroy a family? Your stories matter, and together we'll keep uncovering these lessons. One betrayal, one act of justice, one story at a time. Until next time, remember, justice always finds its way home.